Hello, this is my next guest, Fred Gallagher, and he is a great artist, and his project is Megatokyo visual novel game. Hello, Fred.
Yep. Hi, how you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
Not too bad. It's been a long day,
Yeah,
but I'm here.
well, yeah, but you can't be bad because if I look at your funding, it's just amazing. Um, Alex just sent me a chat that in past few hours, between 8 and 10 hour time,
hmm
you added, let me see what it was, it 2,300 and no, $2,633, and it was pledged by only 13 people.
Yeah,
Um,
I know that there
I
were a couple of $2,000 tiers which you sort of get you into the game, and I know that one of them somebody wants to be one of the characters' chew toys. So,
Yeah, I
for the
mean, now
for
now you exceeded
fun.
your initial funding goal of $20,000 by 10 times already.
Yeah,
You still have
it's
13 days to go. I just checked,
mhm.
and you're just reaching stretch goal after stretch goal. Are you running out of stretch goals now?
Oh, this thing it outscaled even at my most positive thinking kind of a long time ago, actually, which I suppose is a cautionary tale for people who do Kickstarters, because I thought that I'd be, the 20,000 goal to do a third of the game. I thought was at least a realistic goal. You sort of figure out what can you do the project at that makes sense and it's not too excessive, and then you start thinking, well, how can we make the game better if we reach that goal? And I figured, by the time we get to the end of this, if things went really well, I could maybe add a couple more characters, get up to, you know, in fact, my first batch of stretch goals was kind of what I really wanted to do, and we it kind of blew through that like within like 2 or 3 days,
Yeah,
which
it's amazing.
and I found myself like going, well, what now? What do I add next? And it was you have to be careful because I mean you don't want to just start adding things just for the sake of adding them. It's the whole idea. You try to keep the project or what you're trying to do in in scope and make sure that you don't overdo it because you don't want to
Yeah.
like, oh, hey, well, let's just add this and later on find out it's a real difficult thing to do.
Yeah, I think that's a danger that you overwhelm yourself and then you have to delay the whole project and you just don't get everything done that you promised. And that's not popular, obviously. I don't know whether you've seen our project. We have this 22 million pounds stretch goal
hmm
where we simply invite the first 100 backers over to a party.
hmm
And we would pay for all the travel expense. But I must say we're yeah, a long way away from 22 million, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's
uh,
the thing is that with some of the stretch goals, you find yourself going, well, oh great, now I have to do this, and it's in my case, it was definitely one where I think Kickstarter works best in that it helps make a project happen for the
right.
start to start, and then it gives people an opportunity to help you make the project better, you know, which is
Yeah,
something you
absolutely.
can't do if you find out about a finished project, and I mean you can't help it get better. It's already done. So I mean that's kind of the neat thing about Kickstarter, I think. But in my case, like I said, I never thought that all three parts would get funded. So I've got at least a year and a half worth of work if I keep to my 6 month per game part schedule, and it's great to be doing well, but at the same time, it's like, oh crap. So you get the actual worries, about making sure you can do it. But those are good problems. You know what I'm saying?
I know it's a good problem to have, but nevertheless, you have to solve it.
Oh yeah.
Maybe we should get people a bit of your background. You're an actual artist in specializing in Japanese comic books,
Well, yeah. Well, actually, I'm an architect of all things, or at least I used to be. Back in 2000, I was working full time as an architect, and I had from a friend of mine, my former partner Rodney. He sort of bugged me to start working on a web comic, and I kind of just started doing a couple of them just to shut him up,
Okay.
and it sort of grew out of control from there, and eventually it got to the point I was too busy with doing the comic to be able to work as an architect. So it's been keeping me busy over the years. that's for sure. But I've been doing the comics since 2000, and you know, the past couple of years have been a little quiet because there's been some health issues in the family, and most recently my own health issues, which are now gratefully all fixed. But you know, when things have been quiet for a couple of years, I really didn't think anyone was paying attention that much. So that's why the support that I've had for this project kind of boggles me, to be honest with you. I didn't think that I'd get anywhere near this kind of support. So
I think there's probably also a little bit of understatement here now, because I saw that you won quite a few awards and that your comic book is the only one published by a major Japanese publishing company.
It's not the only one, not by far. I think it was the first one that Kodansha picked up to publish in English in Japan, to translate in under their Kodansha box title at the time. I know that there have been quite a few others and stuff, so I definitely don't want to, you know, but it's a nice thing to you know, at least be at a level where, you know, you see yourself and you also see other people who are, you know, doing this kind of work. And you know, it's not a question of it's kind of like there's a lot of artists that are influenced by, you know, American comics over the years, and you know, I'm just part of a, you know, kind of an early starter, I guess, as part of a group of people who are very much influenced by Japanese manga and stuff. I mean, I was a fan of manga back in the early '90s, so I got a bit of a head start on that before it started to. Actually, I never really thought it would ever get as popular as it has. So.
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised because I always thought manga is a one-way street from Japan to the world. So I was impressed that you actually made it the other way around, so that they actually translated your mangas from English into Japanese and published them.
It's really kind of strange to have one of these. This is the actual translated version. It's the first volume that they did.
Make sure you open the backside first.
It's kind of weird to see something like this. It was kind of odd when I was working with the translator who was working on it. I was giving her all of the references and things to lots of different anime and manga titles and things that I've watched over the years. And you know, she's like, I'm gonna have to go to a video store because I haven't seen some of these in years, because there are like dozens of references going back, you know, 10, 20 years. So that was kind of fun in some ways. You know.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you have a huge fan base, otherwise your success wouldn't be explicable. And I can see that you have a really clear style. And the fan base, in my understanding, sort of urged you to do this game. Is that correct?
Well, it's one of these games. You know, I've been a fan of these types of games for many years. In fact, one of the very earliest influences for Megatokyo comes from you know, the fandom for a lot of these type of games. I was one of the games that I was you know, really eagerly waiting to come out at the time, oddly enough, was a game called Clanat, which is, you know, here I have the deluxe box set, of course, at the time. Now this thing. There was no clue when this thing was going to come out back in, you know, 1999 and in 2000. So, you know, part of sort of got built into the story, the same sort of idea. So, you know, I've got, you know, Kimiko is part of you know, this game, this long-awaited game that fans are just eagerly awaiting, but they have no idea when it's going to come. So, you know, just kind of plugging into that concept of being a fan of something a little obscure was sort of built in some ways. Yeah, I've never really. If I was considering ever doing any sort of game like this before, it was to do the game that's in the story, because she's working on a game called Sight, which I was thinking maybe I could, you know, do that. You know, another type of, when I've thought about game projects in the past, it was always to do something like you know, an RPG, a dungeon crawler type of thing for the end games thing. There's lots of different gaming type of things I could have done, but I'm not a programmer, so it's, you know, if I was going to have work on a game project, I would be very sort of secondary to it. I would, you know, hardly be involved. I'd probably, if anyone's ever seen my coding, they would try to keep me as far away from it as possible. But doing a visual novel, it's sort of a different thing. It's a lot of writing, it's a lot of art. And, you know, with the existence of, you know, some really solid backends. There are Japanese backends that have been around a long time. They're mostly commercial products. But Ren'Py is an open source back end that's based in Python, and it's actually incredibly robust. And I've seen many examples of games that have been made with it, including one example, Katawa Shoujo, which is an incredibly good game. It just showed, it was an example of what can be done with this platform. So I started thinking about doing the site game again and pondering it, and then for some reason I just started to think, well, what if I did Megatokyo itself as a game? And it was like, wait a minute, that'd be insanely stupid, or would it? So the more I started thinking about it, the more I started to think that, especially with the way that I do artwork and the way that I frame out panels and kind of the way I think, I thought that it might be an interesting concept. Because the main concept of Megatokyo is that you've got a world where it looks completely different depending on which character's viewpoint you're looking at it through. In the comic, you're doing a lot of contrasting that. You'll see one character's viewpoint and you'll see another character's viewpoint, and they'll see different things in the same thing. But in doing a game like this, if you could start the game by playing only as that character, you would see the entire world through their viewpoint. But then you could go back and play another character, and you might see the same scenes, but they might be completely different. And expanding on that, that's sort of where this concept grew out of. And the more I worked on it, and the more we started to pull some ideas together, the more it seemed like a really interesting idea. So obviously, with the reaction to the Kickstarter, I guess other people seem to think it's an interesting idea too. So
yeah, maybe it was a very logical step to just do that. And sometimes the best idea is very close, and you just don't get to it. And then all of a sudden you have this Eureka moment where you go like, yeah, well, why not do that?
Yeah, well, I have a friend who I said, hey, what are you doing? Come over here. I want to talk about this. So, and once I got the sense that maybe I wasn't insane, I sort of started pondering it a little bit more. And when the people that you're talking, your team, your friends and people that are really eager to work on it as well, as opposed to any other harebrained ideas you may have had in the past, that maybe there's something here. So, yeah, the more we worked on it, the more it seemed like an incredibly solid idea. So, it's going to be a lot of work. I mean, there's a lot of writing. There's a lot of, one of the big problems was if you're dealing with, a lot of times a visual novel game will go from a game to an anime or manga adaptations or whatever, and what you've got is you're taking from the game to a linear story. We've got a linear story, but we're talking about taking this and all of a sudden having all these branching paths and different story endings and things going crazy in different directions. So it's a bit of a challenge it's a little bit like writing a doujinshi of your own work. You're taking your own comic and you're like, well, what happened if these two characters suddenly something happened here? And the next thing you know, you're off on this other angle. So it's actually kind of fun to contemplate it.
Yeah, you sort of lead me to a question that I had in mind. Is it comparable to an adventure game, or is your concept less flexible in what the characters can actually do? And does it keep the player more tightly to a given storyline?
Well, you're going to be tied to some. There's going to be storylines that are going to have. There'll be questions that come up, and depending on your answer to that question, the story may continue on the same point, but it may have set a flag or it may have changed a variable that will have an impact on a direction that happens later on. So there's a lot of reading. There's a lot of but it's kind of it's a little bit like watching I can't give people an animated version of Megatokyo, so it's a little bit like following along on a story in that respect. And as you go along, you can respond to questions in ways that either you yourself would respond, or maybe just thinking what would happen if this character had done something else. So there's some challenges in trying to figure out how to get down different paths. It's not there's semantic issues of what exactly to call. A true NVL or visual novel in the Japanese sense is very linear. It's words, it's images, and it's basically like reading an online light novel. This is going to be like reading a light novel with images and pictures and stuff like that. But at the same time, it has a lot of branches to it, and the way that these branches work is actually a lot more complicated than you might think. So.
Yeah, if you read a comic book, you're ready to read. And I think this is just a digital comic book that is interacting with the reader. Is that a way of looking at it?
Well, that's one way of looking at it. One way to have approached this, and when I started, that was kind of my first idea, is like, oh, okay, it's just another more interesting way to sort of experience, Megatokyo itself and get through the story. But the more I started to play with the idea, the more I started to realize that I could work with, because when you're the way that I write, there's a lot of places where I've made decisions or things that have come up where the characters have sort of told me what they wanted to do, and what I'm going to be doing is I'm sort of working with a lot of points where, well, what if something different had happened? And what I'm doing is I'm giving people an opportunity to sort of see where these other paths might have gone. And these sorts of stories typically have good endings, bad endings, neutral endings, very bad, the world ends endings. There's singularity endings. There's fantastic endings. And there's no guarantee that the Megatokyo story itself is going to lead to any good endings at all. So it's a bit of a challenge to sort of play with that, and also to see how different characters might have interacted with each other. So in a lot of ways, it's playing with the narratives a lot, and also because people get attached or have an interest in the characters and how they behave and how they think, and the characters it's very much a character-driven story. So if you allow the characters to do different things, it's kind of surprising sometimes to see what they'll do. And a game like this is a little bit of an exploration to sort of find that out. And also in the story, in the comic, you're comparing things. I mean, the contrast between Largo's world and Pillage world. But when you're playing the game, you're going to be totally in one character's viewpoint. So it might be interesting just to see your experience, how you're going to feel about things as you go through that.
So do you expect players to have many save games so that they can go back and see what would have happened if 2 days or 3 days ago I would have made this or that decision differently?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact, that's probably the best way to play, because there's the quintessential joke will be as you're going along, and if you make the wrong choice, next thing you know, you find yourself in an airplane back to the United States, and game over. That would be the quick bad ending that you might hit. But at the same time, you can. That's part of the way that visual novel games are typically played. Is as you go through, you may rethink about how you may have approached and gone through a different choice or set of choices to get to different ends. So there's going to be a lot of saves, and since you've got all these different characters you're playing, each character is going to have their own sets of saves, and the way WRMP is set up is that you can have as many saves as you want. It's just a question of managing them on your own. And when you go from one part, like part one, basically when you get to the end of part one, none of these story paths are really over. Well, some might be, but what you're doing is when you hit the end of the game, there's an ending of sorts, but there'll be a save. It's basically a save point. So when the second part of the game, which is the downloadable content, you plug that in, you will continue right from any of those saves that you've had. So it goes right through to part 3 as well.
And in the creative process, when you develop your story, do you sort of have debates with your characters in your mind? So what would you do next? And the character responds in your head and says, this is what I'm going to do.
I often kind of think that there's one side of my brain that writes the story and it doesn't talk to me very often, because I have things that somehow work out years later that it's like I planned it, and I know for a fact I didn't. What I try to do is I'm not a big fan of. I have loose structures of what I think I'd like to see, but at the same time, as I'm getting to those points, I'll often have things where it's like. Sometimes I'll be working on the story, and as I'm drawing this, I just don't see it working right. Like that character's reaction doesn't lead in that direction. So if I let the character react in a natural way, what I think that character would react, sometimes the story changes dramatically. That's happened a lot actually over the years, and I've tried to stay true to that with how I do this. And so, people have asked me, it's like, do you know what's going to happen with X, Y, Z? It's, to be honest with you, and one of the reasons I want to finish I keep working on the comic is because I want to find out what's going to happen as much as anybody else does.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I've seriously, usually, in the creative process, the characters mostly come out when I'm drawing. So I can write myself till I'm blue in the face about what I think is going to happen. But once I start drawing, the expressions or what comes out in the character's face might completely change things, and that's why I never end up with the same dialogue that I wrote initially.
Yeah. It's great stuff that you have there, but we have questions coming in from the audience, and I want to answer a few of them. First question is, are there any localizations planned?
Well, technically, actually, I would say yes. I haven't made it. I don't like to make it, go, officially, we are going to do X, Y, and Z until I have actual plans in place and how it would work. We actually have a pretty robust translation community for Megatokyo. Megatokyo.it. They have, there's an Italian version, there's a German version, there's Spanish language version, quite a number. I'm doing them a disservice by not being able to name them all. And they've already talked to me a little bit about the potential of providing, a little more localized versions. I know that Ren'Py has the ability to offer localization. It's a little complicated because you got to deal with if you're going to localize it, you should also be able to localize menus and other things like that. So it's a bit complicated, and also I wouldn't be able to really start a translation project on this until after the game is written and done to a certain extent.
Yes, of course.
It would be after the game is released, but I'm totally in support of getting localized versions of the game available.
Okay,
so
great.
It's definitely something I'd like to see, because I've had I've had followers. And the nice thing with the internet is it's not bound by anything, And seeing as somebody who I've struggled for years with all these Japanese visual novel games and being unable to read them.
Yeah,
nothing I can appreciate
that's hard
more
to do.
how much more enjoyable they are in your own language, where you can actually comfortably read them. Even if you can struggle through in another language, being localized to your own language just makes it much more comfortable to play. And I personally would like to see that. So.
Okay. So next question, when do you think the beta testing will be released?
Well, probably, I know that Sean and some of the others have already set up. I'm trying to get the main stuff straightened out for it, but there'll be a site that beta testers will have access to, with forums and also information about what's going on, what's available. And basically, there will be points when when we'll be able to put up stuff for people to test. I don't have any set dates or time frames for that. But I know that it's like any game. Once you feel like you have a point where you'd really like to start getting some feedback other than your own, Megatokyo is very much a community. I mean, the community is a big part of what I do. I mean, I do, like when I'm working on this, you're going to be able to watch me make most of the artwork for this online. I do, a lot of drawing live on Justin TV. On my channel there. So, I mean, people are going to be able to follow the creation project a lot. This is not okay, we're going to go hide for 6 months and then, here's the game. So involving people and beta testers and people are really keen to sort of have some impact. I'm very keen to give them that ability. So, and we're starting to put the systems together for that. Just not sure exactly at what point we'll have playable stuff, but a couple of months in, I'm pretty sure we'll have stuff for them to try out, even if it's small.
Okay, speaking of the art, I think we should show some of the art, and then we'll continue while it's running. There you go. There is another question. Do you believe that...
something from another project, but that's okay.
Okay, sorry. Do you think that interactive comics are successful in Europe or in the US?
Well, I know the visual novel genre. I mean, it's very popular in Japan. It's a very robust. I got hooked on these things years and years ago. Haven't been as successful in getting a foothold here, and I think part of it is I think a lot of there's a I wouldn't call it a stigma, but there's a general assumption that most visual novels most visual novels really are sort of in the gal get. In other words, you're trying to pursue a number of female characters, and the whole purpose of the game is that. And it's not all. There's a lot more to it than just that aspect. I think visual novels can be a very interesting experience, and they're a lot of fun to play, a lot of fun to go through, and they take a lot of time. They're immersive, and once you get into them, that's part of the process. It's like watching a really good anime series, And I think that the problem is, because it takes a while, you really have to sit down with them and play them. and there have been so few of them that have come out in English that the exposure to markets outside Japan has just been lost. So I don't know, but there's been a lot of really good ones that fan efforts and efforts of people and to do them in English. So hopefully this one doesn't completely bomb the genre.
I don't think so. Alex he's watching our chat, the live chat, and he summarized the reactions in the chat as very positive, and everybody thinks it's amazing. It's an amazing idea to do this.
Well, it's sort of, it's kind of a no-brainer now that I'm thinking about it. I'm just kind of surprised I hadn't kind of pushed with the idea sooner. Although, part of it's, like I said, tools. Renpi's development over years is kind of coincides with what I'm trying to do in a good way. So I definitely feel confident. The nice thing about it is that in doing a project like this, I don't have to think about, how am I going to? I'm going to have to spend so much time developing a back end just to deliver the visual novel content. This is, we have a back end that even if we don't tweak it too much, if I just focus on art and story, and that's the bulk of our push, which is where the game really is, that we can come up with a decent game. We don't have to worry about developing an entire back end. So tweaking it, yeah, there's a lot that you can do with tweaking it, but the main thrust is to try to provide content, I guess, and and story, and the ways to make it more as interesting as I can, and that's kind of what my thrust on this is.
Okay, so we have an unusual question from the audience. What do you think about ghost hunting?
Ghost hunting. Funny thing you should say. I am actually a big fan of a game called Yume Nikki, which is Dream Diary, which is a RPG Maker game, kind of a fan-made game by a Japanese guy, and Kutayama, I believe his name is. Huge fan base. It's a very weird little game. I know that for a fact there is going to be very much a horror path in this game somewhere.
Really?
Almost just because the places I can go and the different flavors of different scenarios, you can do things that you can't do in the main comic, and I guess that's going to be one of the fun things about doing this. And I know that as a fan of Yume Nikki and some other games of that genre, there's some interesting things that I want to do, and there are ghosts involved. At least I think they're ghosts. We'll find out.
Okay, great. It's great that it actually worked out, because we've been chasing each other for several days, and I'm glad that you could make room. You were able to make room for this interview.
Oh, not a problem. Well, it's like I said, this has been it's been a weird week. I mean, you throw when I started the Kickstarter, I'm thinking, oh, okay, the 4th of July is a holiday here in the States, and it's like, well, that's in the middle, so that'll be okay. Of course, it's been further complicated. My mom is actually in the hospital right now. She was getting surgery today.
I'm sorry about that.
It's this is fine. I'm like, okay, shoot, I've got to answer this guy's email, and we got to set up this podcast. I'm actually glad it worked out, because we were going to try to pre-record this yesterday, so instead we get to do it live today.
So, yeah, and we can answer some questions. So that's the great thing about being live. Okay, so again, thanks for joining us. I have to go off to the live ghost hunt, because Tassilo keeps ringing us. We'll do this as a separate YouTube video, and I'll send you the link as soon as it is up.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. So take care.
Thank you very much for your time. Bye, Fred.
Bye.